One day each of us will close our eyes for the final time. Our hearts will slowly cease to beat, and our last breath will whisper through silent lips as we leave this existence behind. Yet is this truly the end? Do we simply cease to be as the last spark races from our brains along cooling neurons to its final destination in oblivion? Or does the part of us that is uniquely our own continue beyond the grave? Is there existence beyond the temporal? And if so, what mysteries might that existence hold? There are those who would have us believe that our lives end with our final tomorrow, that the physical world is both our beginning and ultimate end. There are also those who reject this explanation, instead contending that the physical world is simply one aspect of an existence which may stretch on through eternity. For now, we are left to wonder if the strange apparitions are a product of our feverish minds, or if ghosts do haunt the fringes of the material world. The ultimate truth may lie somewhere between, unknown to us until we each pass beyond that veil. And between our searching eyes and that veil lies a path that leads us to the shadows of legend. Hello, and welcome to Shadows of Legend. I'm your host, Charles Romans, and today we're speaking with Wes Forsythe. Wes is behind and in front of the scenes at the very popular Scarefest horror convention every year in Lexington, Kentucky. How are you doing today, Wes?
I'm having a good day so far, believe it or not.
Those are rare. So, if you don't care, give me a little bit of background about Scarefest and what goes on up there.
Boy, that could take a whole show. Anyway, we are one of the largest horror conventions in the United States of America. We're probably top 5, top 3, somewhere in there. We are the largest when it comes to our particular genre, which is paranormal and horror.
Yes.
And this is our 15th year coming up in October. Would have been 16, except for you know what. And we just bring in about 60 celebrities every year. Horror, mostly horror, but a good little lineup usually of paranormal celebrities. We are a fan convention. I don't want to confuse that with your run-of-the-mill Paracon, where it's more, I don't want to say serious, but it does attract a different crowd.
Well, yes.
But it's for people that are fans of the genres, and we'll have 150 to 200 vendors. And the main thing that sets us apart, even if you're not really into celebrity worship or however you would want to put it, we provide entertainment from the time the door opens till after the doors close even. We just try to create a full experience for our people. And of course, that is coming up October 20th through the 22nd this year.
Excellent. And I'm assuming advanced ticket sales will go on soon?
Ticket sales are online now. We had a little slowdown due to I'm going to put this kindly, drastic rent increase. So we had to do a little negotiating, but it kind of puts everything on hold, because you have to wonder, how much do we have to charge the people to get in and not, actually lose money before the con even starts? But we
Right.
got it worked out. Vendor sales should go on in the next week or so. We have a seminar series, a speaker series that you've taken part in.
Yes.
That should go up in the next week or so. So we're a good month behind where we normally are getting the balls rolling, but we are getting everything kind of lined out. And the one thing we're ahead on, we just haven't announced them, is celebrities. Because we've been so successful the last 2 years, we've got people that's, begging to come to Scarefest this year. And when it fits our vision, if you will, we're accommodating. And so we've announced 2, and we're going to announce, I think, 1 or 2 more this Friday. And every Friday, we try to announce a celebrity or 2 until we run out.
Now, the best way for people to follow you would be on your Facebook page or your actual website?
Yeah, typical social media stuff. If they'll do a Facebook search for The Scarefest, That will lead you to our business page, our fan group page, and the news is always fresher on the fan group because it's so much easier to post on it. But then we also have an event page. But yeah, we're all over Facebook. We're on Twitter. Um, we're allegedly going to be on TikTok soon. We're on it, but we haven't gotten very far because we don't know how to twerk. Um, and Instagram, Instagram's a big thing now, and we're getting our presence rolling pretty good on Instagram. But if you search for the Scarefest, you will find us darn near any place you look.
Well, that's good to know. And one of the things I wanted to ask you before we delve into how you became interested in the paranormal, what do you think the attraction is for both the commercial side of it, your movies and your works of fiction, and both that and the actual legends and things that have been recorded from eyewitnesses, things of that nature? What do you think of the fascination?
I tell you the truth, I don't try to overthink it. I don't think it's that much different. Now, in the paranormal side, you have the whole life universe and everything. A lot of people are searching for answers, but when it comes to the horror side in particular, and the paranormal side to a great degree, it's the same attraction as you get when you're talking about why do people ride roller coasters. People like to be scared. They like to be startled. Um, and that leads to this fascination with that part of the movie world and TV world.
So, was there any sort of fear incident that originally got you interested in the paranormal and the strange?
No, I am so mundane. I As far as the paranormal side, and now this has been almost 20 years ago. I've been trying to do the math, and because of COVID, it threw everything off here.
Mm.
But anyway, so 17, maybe 17, 18 years ago. But my sin was I just liked watching paranormal TV. At the time, Ghost Hunters was the big show. Ghost Adventures was neck and neck with them. There were a few others floating around at that time, but those were the two that really held your attention and brought in people like me. And I sat there in my chair watching it, just hardly ever missed an episode. As a matter of fact, I got Ghost Hunter season 1 on DVD. I was that fan. And but I would sit there and they'd say things and I go, well, no, that doesn't mean that at all. No, that's not necessary. Don't say it like it's a truism. If that's
Okay.
what your theory is, or your hypothesis from what you've observed, fine. But don't say, like, one of my big ones was always ghost are energy. We don't actually know that. We don't know how to translate it. We don't know how to measure it. So just don't even say it like that. Then one weekend, they were doing a more or less a public impromptu ghost hunt down to my local famous haunt. I think I'd been on the Ghost Walk before that, but it's the Ross Opera House. It's generally regarded as the third most haunted place in Kentucky, and I would even argue that it might even be up a notch or two from that because I've been to the two that beat it out. But I went on a ghost hunt, and the equipment I had a infrared camera that it with night vision, one of the nice Sony ones that I had never used in the dark. I,
Okay.
I don't even know why I got one with night vision, but I had it. Batteries lasted like 30 minutes, I think.
Mm.
I had a digital recorder because some sports that we used, we scored uh, some team trials on a fox hunting, and we used recorders to record our scores. So I had a digital recorder, and I had a flashlight, and that was it. That's what I took with me that night. Oh, and I had a flash camera. I did have a camera, and I went on it, and honestly, nothing major happened that first night as far as what I could bring home and say, hey, this is evidence of a haunting. But it absolutely hooked me. Just the experience of it, the history of it, the possibilities of it. And I instantly went out and spent way too much money on a whole lot of equipment and became a ghost hunter.
Well, that's a very interesting origin story, especially since you didn't say, "Oh, well, the first time out of the gate, I picked up an EVP of Great Aunt Ethel."
No, it was like second or third time that I went ghost hunting. It was actually probably the second time I went ghost hunting. I got that really good EVP, and I remember reviewing the evidence after I'd come home, and I screamed my head off. I said, "Oh my God, this is so cool!" Yelled for my wife, "Say, come in here, you got to hear this." And that's when it really sunk in.
Okay, so and you said that it sunk in. Was it at that point that you were actually sold on the concept that there might be something beyond this temporal existence?
You know what? No, it's simpler than that. That was what hooked me on ghost hunting. As far as being hooked on the idea that there is an afterlife and there might be ghosts, I grew up in a Judeo-Christian household where ghost stories, I'm not saying it was something we centered on, but it wasn't something we avoided. The church that I grew up in, they just kind of, it just wasn't brought up. Nobody said, "Oh, you're going to hell if you go ghost hunting," or, "Don't talk to the dead," or anything
Right.
like that. It was just, it was just legend, if you will. There were ghost stories around, and we loved sitting around the campfire or whatever and telling ghost stories. And some of them we gave credence to, and some of them we said, that's just to shock people. But that I already had that ingrained in me that when we pass away, there's something else. Then now the fascination with figuring out exactly the mechanics of how that worked, because it really wasn't what was taught. But at the same time, if you try to kind of fit them together and you read some passages that suggest, well, yeah, that's possible. I tell people who throw the Bible in my face and say the Bible doesn't support it. In instances, it technically does. But the simplest thing I can tell them is the Bible is your instructions on how to live. It's kind
Okay.
of like if you buy a VCR. It shows my age. I use VCR as an example. But when you bought a VCR, it came with a nice big instruction book, but it didn't tell you how to fix it. It didn't tell you exactly how it worked. It
Exactly.
didn't go into all that detail. And so that's the way I always looked at it. And nothing I've experienced in the paranormal really goes against the way I was taught, bringing up, if you think it through. Now, just because somebody says something, and I'll say a lot of things that may not fit a person's belief structure, but I'm usually pretty careful about saying this is what I believe. You may interpret it differently.
Well, this is true. And typically, what I do, I don't come down a hard line on either end. I try to acknowledge the possibilities.
My thing, okay, just like, okay, here's a really good example. One of my best catches, which actually is what made me quit actually going out ghost hunting all night, we were at the Ross Opera House and we went in, and this time we were armed to the teeth, if you will. We had everything thought through. We'd been doing it long enough. We knew how the equipment worked, how to control the equipment, and how to set up controls for us and the equipment. And so we did a ghost box session. Now, the time before, we'd done a ghost box session, and we'd gotten a little girl's name that we had asked for. When we went back, we said, well, the best way to test this, so let's see if we get that exact name again. And we got it. And it was clear and it was loud. And there is no, that could have been somebody's thumbnail on the recorder. No, it was that absolutely perfectly clear. And it was exactly what we asked for and what we knew the answer should be. Then I played that for one of my skeptical friends, and their critical critical explanation. Well, how do you know you didn't project that into the recorder with your mind? And I said, would you just go ahead and prove that, and I'm good.
Yeah.
That solves all of life mysteries. We create it all. Maybe it is all just this great imagination thing. But I've had enough experiences over the year that it all just falls into place, that there is something else out there. Now, I don't know all the mechanics of it. I know what I believe to a great degree. And there's parts that when people ask me about it, I'll say, that's above my pay grade. I just don't move on from there. That's all I need to know.
When a person says that they're an expert and presents themselves as knowing everything, then generally that's a red flag because no one can know everything about anything, to be honest about it.
No, I'll even go to, okay, I really don't like the term paranormal expert. Now, I do believe many people in the field rise to what I would call paranormal authority. In other
Okay.
words, they know enough about it. They know enough about the equipment. They know enough about what people observe, both on the skeptical side and the believer side, that they become an authority. But yes, expert carries with it a certain weight that they're off the top of my head, I'm really leery about calling anybody an expert. Now, that being said, I do think there are a lot of people out there that are experts in fields of the paranormal. You can be an expert in audio research if you understand, how waveforms work. You can be an expert in energy fields. There are a lot of things to be an expert in, and I would encourage anybody to pick an area and read and read the science on it, read the technology on it, and embrace being an expert in a part of the paranormal. But that is a long shot from being a paranormal expert.
I would be inclined to agree with that absolutely because there's just too many variables to consider. My father used to say, "The job isn't a job; it's a bunch of little jobs put together."
Exactly. You know, um, you can be an expert welder.
Yes,
That, but even that can be a little misleading because being an expert welder doesn't mean you are an expert in all fields of welding.
yes, because there's
So,
dozens.
yeah.
So uh, that kind of segues into another thing that I was going to ask you about here. Now, the paranormal is such a large blanket term,
Oh, absolutely.
and it doesn't always have to be the souls of deceased humans or angelic or demonic spirits. Sometimes it can be strange things like the gentleman you just referenced that would touch on ESP and so many other things. So, what other branches of the paranormal do you have experience with?
Honestly, none. the I okay. Now, as far as the paranormal, I started out the classical TV ghost hunter.
Yes.
And then, but I did enjoy working with psychics. I
Okay.
thought that they did, one at a time, they add something to the conversation. But as I was working with this psychics, they kept telling me, you're gifted, you're gifted. And I went, no, no, I'm really not. And finally, some things kind of came together that I did start looking into the what I call the more spiritual side. We need a new word for that. Metaphysical side of the paranormal. And so I
Esoteric.
pursued that, and that's kind of where I settled. Now, when it comes to Bigfoot, too much walking for me. I'm a 58-year-old smoker, and if I can hunt them in from the side from the truck, then I'm good. But if I have to walk up a mountain, just leave me at camp. Ufology, it fascinates me, but I'm not going to go out I'm not likely to be the guy that sees a UFO because I tend to not look up. And I don't know why that is,
Well, most
but
of us don't, honestly, because we're trained to believe that everything that is of importance to us is at eye level.
right. And I'm I driving down the highway, I'm not likely to hit a UFO. Although interestingly, there is a story on Google. If you Google it, it's a train hit a UFO. Um,
We had talked about that earlier. Yes.
but yeah, so I concentrate to a great degree, on what is affecting me at the moment. And I guess when I go, and it's now the drawback to having that type personality is when I go ghost hunting, um, people go, "Did you hear that?" And I'm like, "No, what?" I tend to tune out except what I'm concentrating on. I'm not one of those big picture guys.
Well, there's a fallacy about multitasking. Most people can't, and I don't think anyone actually does it well. So I think if you program yourself to listen for these noises, you'll be able to pick them up better. But I don't think a person can absorb all the information. That's why we have things like recorders, and you mentioned the
Hmm.
spirit boxes and stuff like that to offset the failing of our senses.
Oh, absolutely. And when it comes, and I mean, I don't even like to use the word theory. I've got hypothesis about how an actual classical EVP works. I believe it's actually our digital recorders picking up on on uh, on an energy field. In other words, I'm going to dumb this down to where I would understand it. Um, when a ghost speaks, they don't necessarily, in the EVP range, they do not disturb the air where our ears will pick it up. They do, however, whether it's a function of the veil or something beyond that, I honestly I don't even think about it. But they create a fluctuation in that energy that our recorders can pick up. And I believe that's how your true EVP works. Of course, it's electronic voice phenomenon.
Yes.
It's not, oh, I just didn't freaking hear that phenomenon. Now, can they sometimes make audible noises? Absolutely. That is a different process that maybe if the amount of manifestation is is enough that sometimes, yes, I believe we can actually hear them with our nice human ears, but I don't believe it's all in our heads, and I have enough data collected, and I've seen even better data than my own, that there are ways to measure this, that there are ways to collect these samples, and you have to attribute them to something.
Yes. Well, honestly, if there wasn't something disturbing the air, then nothing would pick it up. So there has to be an origin source for these phenomena.
Yeah, the EVPs have to come from somewhere. And now it's one thing to this, oh, that's kind of random. But when what you pick up is not random, it answers a question. It tells you a name, out of the blue. A really good example. Now, I am a fan of dowsing. In other words, I take two. Now I've got really nice copper dowsing rods, but honestly, I've used coat hangers and had just as good a luck.
Okay.
And we had he's a believer, but he's kind of like me. He likes to see proof. And he did not believe in dowsing, did not believe in dowsing. And I said, well, first of all, I don't use dowsing as evidence. Absolutely not. It's as accurate as a free wristwatch. You just can't count on it. But I said, we use it as a bridge. In other words, it gets the spirits involved with us. It gets them wanting to communicate with us. That's my belief structure, and I believe it helps on the EVP side, and and whatever we do outside of that. And he said, well, let's test it. You do a dowsing rod section, and I'll put a recorder right under you, and we'll see if we get anything. And it worked. We would get no, he would hear the word no. We'd get a yes, he would hear the word yes. So things like that. I'm sure there's someone out there who can explain that away much better than I can. But to me, it was the perfect storm to prove that even if they're inaccurate, that dowsing does add something to the equation.
Well, I would think it would have to. People don't understand. I think that everything is a series of actions and reactions and interactions.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned sound earlier. We know that dog whistles work. We can't hear them. Dogs can. The sound's there. Simply because we don't pick up on it doesn't mean it's not. And there's something that generates that. And it could be, as you said, the dowsing could be like an animating factor there to start the conversation.
Right. I believe that when I go in dowsing, and there are people that are much better at dowsing than me, by the way, but I believe that once a ghost finds out that they can make your body react in a way that they can see through the dowsing rods, then that gets them excited because they're used to not being able to communicate with us at all.
I would say that would track definitely because, as you were telling that earlier, I was thinking that assuming that you were a ghost in a particular location, and 99.9% of the humans that passed by had no clue you were there.
Right.
And then one person shows up that can communicate with you, it would generate a lot of excitement.
That's my hypothesis.
And have you been able to support that hypothesis with anything besides the dowsing? Are there other things that you can do to generate communication with the spirit realm, for lack of a better way to put it?
Dowsing rods are we'll call it my specialty.
Okay.
I've been called an expert. I just love that. But yeah, when you do the talk at the local library and they say that, then it's like, please don't. But we have done some experiments with getting it. They range from what I would call getting the ghost attention to actually trying to interrupt the veil. Now, the veil, for lack of a better explanation, and this is just the way I picture it in my mind, it may be much more complicated or much more simple, is the curtains, if you will, between our three-dimensional world and their whatever the heck dimensional world they, pardon the expression, live in, exist in. We'll say exist in.
Okay.
So I have done some stuff where I like to do things to disrupt that, or sometimes I call it the bad neighbor experiment. We will do things that I don't provoke. Okay, now I don't go into a location, all puffed out and yelling obscenities and challenging them. However, I have found things like, if I'm in a big building that's hard to cover,
yes,
I have found that if I pick the part of the building that I don't want to mess with and put a strobe light in there. Now I'm talking about a good old-fashioned disco strobe light that you have to wait till Christmas to buy at Walmart. I guess Amazon probably has them now. But there's a basement at one of our haunts, and it's just nasty and it's dark and dank. It seems creepy as heck, but we've never really gotten any evidence there, although I've heard some good ghost stories. But we stuck a strobe light down there. And to me, maybe it's my age, but I just find strobe lights horribly, horribly annoying. So I said, well, let's give it a shot. Got no evidence down there. We kept a camera going, didn't get any evidence, but it actually did seem to spike the evidence in the other parts of the building. Mostly EVP, but occasionally the shadow in the wrong spot, or I don't think we were doing it the night that we caught some really good video evidence a few times. I don't remember if those were one of the nights we did that or not, but that's one thing we do. I go in nowadays, I try to disrupt the veil. And I do believe everything about this is based on vibration. And my only real control over vibration is harmonics. And that, to dumb that down, that's making noise.
Right.
Or it doesn't even have to be noise, it can just be vibrations. So I will, and I look like a Parkinson's patient, but when I'm in a location, I will tap my finger all the time, like I'm nervous, but just constantly tap my finger, creating what I think could resonate through the veil to, once again, draw their attention, possibly even weaken the veil. I don't know, but just things like that to draw attention to me. See, and it does seem to play out.
Yeah, I would think that would be effective. Like when you mentioned the disco ball, maybe not pick up anything there, but drive any spirit from there into the other room to get away from the disco ball.
Exactly. It seemed very simple to me. I said, well, heck, why not? But we did set up a camera just in case, we would catch something, in the light. In other words, a shadow that appeared, for 2 or 3 flicks. We didn't. I'm not saying they couldn't have, but we just didn't. But yeah, things like that. Try to make yourself, not yourself. You want yourself to be inviting, but try to make the environment annoying.
So basically, make them gravitate towards you.
Exactly.
And then if you're prepared to record this or interact with this, then it facilitates the process so much better.
Yes, that's been my experience in the field. Now with dowsing, one thing we love doing, especially when you and they're like a dime a dozen, but every place is haunted by child ghost.
Yes.
Now I've got a whole another story on what child ghosts are to a large degree, but they are, for the sake of the investigation, you are dealing with children. And so what we do is we take our dowsing rods and we let them lead us around a location. If you want me to go left, you make my dowsing rods go left. If you want to go right, then we have stop. And the interesting thing is, beyond us doing it, it's fun to hand the rods to someone else and let them take it over. And you see the smiles. Now you early in the show you asked about the greatest fear. Now I will say though the drawback to that is we let a younger member of we were on a public hunt. In other words, we were basically hired as guides, me and my wife.
Okay.
Or my wife and I, to use proper English. And while we were setting up the equipment, DVR system, cameras, all that stuff, we let the teenage daughter do the dowsing game. Well, they led her to the stairs we were at the top of. We walked out of the room we were in, and it's on a spring-loaded door. Nothing haunted here, nothing to see. But when we walked through the door, it slammed.
Okay.
Now, it's at the top of the stairs. She's at the bottom of the stairs. When she heard that door slam, she screamed this perfect horror movie scream. And we're at the top of the stairs, so guess who got the end of the scream? Oh, it has scared us to death. It's
like, no doubt, yes.
We've never heard that in this location before. So that was the most frightened I'd ever gotten on a location, and it was completely human, completely innocent, but it was fun.
That begs another question though. Have you ever been on any of these ghost hunts and felt physically or spiritually threatened?
That is actually part of my gift, and I call it a gift. I believe it comes straight from God with a capital G that I was raised with. Mm-hmm. But I am pretty much, I'm not sure if I'm Teflon coated or if I'm bulletproof. I haven't pushed that part of the envelope yet, but I do not get attacked. I'm not the guy that's going to get pushed downstairs. I don't get scratched. Now, that being said, I have been in situations where I got emotions that I knew were not mine. I got physical pains that I knew were not mine. And when that happens, I am able to instantly push it out. And when I do it, I say, no, that's yours. That's not mine. Thanks for telling me your story, but back the heck up.
So based on the way you said it, you think in a lot of cases, what some people might be experiencing as a feeling of terror isn't so much the spirit or entity trying to scare someone as sharing their own pain, so to speak.
Well, okay, I'm gonna back off that a little bit. I am sure because there are enough people in the world that would love to do nothing that annoy you or scare you. I am quite sure that if ghosts are indeed the deceased spirits of our dearly departed, there are a few ghosts that are just jerks and would love nothing more than to terrorize you. And if they can some way find a way to scare you, to put that emotion in your head, they will do it. I do think most of the time when we feel, though, I think a lot of it is just misguided attempts to get attention. I think sometimes when they want to tell their story, because, okay, if a ghost is going to tell you their story, I would say a big part of that story, situational based, is that they're dead.
Yes.
And I can say from experience, not that I've been dead, but I have been around someone who passed away. And the most uncomfortable part of the experience for me was watching how much, knowing they were close to death, that scared them. So now, if they could if they stuck around as a ghost, which that particular time they didn't, I can see a ghost passing that emotion onto you so that you understand how they feel.
That's a fair assessment, I think, because it could be and again, I'm extrapolating. I'm not an expert on this either, but it could be that when we'll say translated into a spirit, then they carry that like the violent death or the fear of
Right.
death with them,
Right.
and that is the major part of their personality, at least initially.
Yes, and your chest tightens up, and then you find out, well, so and so died of a heart attack. In other words, they want you to know that story, and I do believe that through whatever means, whether it's direct telekinetic communication or if it's holographic, in the case of seeing things, I do think that many ghosts, I don't even know if they can all do it. I don't know if it's natural or not, but they can impress on you that part of their story.
So you think it's possible that what a ghost does is activate or charge your own sense of empathy?
Yes, yes, that's a good way to put it. Now, depending on how empathic you are, might have to do, might express itself in how deeply you feel that, how hard it is for you to get rid of that, to shake that feeling, how long it lasts.
So everything we've discussed so far has been pretty much the research and everything has been science based and everything. So I was seeing there where you do and you call it bad tarot reading. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, as I got into the metaphysical side of things, one thing, now this may have even predated it. I love tarot cards. I think the artwork on them is just absolutely beautiful. Every time you buy a deck, you get a collection of artwork.
Yes.
And so I collected them, but I never had any interest in reading them. It just didn't even occur to me. For one thing, you got to actually read and study and all that stuff and memorize, and I just didn't want to do it. But a friend of mine, Ken Boggle, who is a gifted tarot card reader, he used to do a thing on Facebook, and I called it metaphysical bull crap. But he'd draw a card, and he tried and use that card to give advice to the public. And I think it's not. I think it's more. That's too much of a shotgun approach.
Okay.
One card doesn't fit all. Now that being said, he was on the road one weekend, and he didn't have time to do it to do his Facebook Live. So I said, you know what? Hey Ken, he was a friend of mine and a sponsor of my show at the time, and I said, I got this. So I took a deck, and I took the most ridiculous deck that I felt I had at the time, the Baroque Cat Tarot.
Okay.
Beautiful, beautiful images involving cats. Okay. The artwork, not just photos.
Yes.
Paintings. So anyway, I drew a card, and I just looked at the card and I made crap up. Okay. To be funny. That's all it was.
Yes.
And it was funny. And the most profound part of the reading, to give your listeners an idea, was that the cat was holding a stick. Actually, it was Bodor. And I said, this is a great weekend to try something impossible because cats don't have opposable thumbs and therefore cannot hold a Bodor.
Exactly.
Now, jump forward. I don't know. I did that a while on Facebook for laughs. And then I was at a little Paracon up in Postown Elementary School. And there were about, I don't know, 30, maybe 40 vendors. And if there were 10 people walking through that building, I would be surprised. So what I did was I said, you know what? I got to find some way to pay my gas money here.
Yeah.
And I had T-shirts, and nobody was buying nothing. But there weren't too many readers there. So I said, you know what? Hey, let's try it. Let's just see if I can be funny in person. So I had some card decks that I'd thrown in my briefcase. I don't even remember why they were in there, except I think I didn't want the dogs and cats to get to them. I pulled out I laid some card decks out, and I put a little sign up behind me, $5 really bad tarot card readings. And one of the first people, she may have been the first woman that sat down with me that day. Now I knew her. We're not friends, but I knew who she was. She sat down and said, I want a reading. I said, well, the first thing you do, you pick the deck, because I didn't care. It's not like I'm connected to any of them.
Right.
So she picked what is called the Tarot of Fire. Now, the Tarot of Fire has beautiful artwork, and every image incorporates fire into the image. Now, if there's no real meaningful way for the artist to put that fire into the image, what he does is he just puts people with their hair on fire. Whatever the character is, hair on fire. Ta-da. Well, I drew a card. Actually, I don't even draw them. I just shuffle till one flies out of the deck. I just drop one because I have really bad hand-eye coordination. And so I picked the card up and I looked at it. And she had asked me basically about her future. She said, I just want to know about my future. And I looked at the card and I looked at her and I looked back at the card. I could not come up with anything funny from this card. I drew a blank. And so the only thing that popped into my head was, someone wants to set your hair on fire. That's what I expected. I expect her to giggle or, say, what are you talking about? No, she leans in and goes, yes, go on. And I'm sorry. And I went, I'm sorry, what? And okay, then she told me this story. She had been diagnosed recently with lupus, and they wanted to try experimental chemotherapy on her that I had no clue of. Now, chemotherapy, hair.
Yes.
Do the math.
Yeah.
And so exactly. And speaking of hair, it stood up on the back of my neck, and I said, yeah, maybe I ought to pay more attention to this. So what I started doing is I started doing readings that way. I went into the reading just seeing what the cards told me. Still, never even read the instructions. And when I shuffle, I let the person choose the deck, and I'll carry 4 or 5 with me. I shuffle them until cards fly out. Sometimes it's one card, sometimes it's a half a dozen. And then I do a reading from that, but it's based merely on what I am drawn to in the picture.
All right.
And that is really bad tarot.
So how do you think, what sort of energy is involved? Because apparently you got that one correct. So what energy?
You make it sound like that's an anomaly.
Well, no. What I'm getting at is that you're saying that you haven't studied it. You're not a student of the tarot.
Right. Okay. Now, to give you the metaphysical answer.
Yes.
I believe now. At that time, I'd already kind of embraced the belief that I had these absolutely great backup group, my spirit guides. I believe from top to bottom, they've been with me all these years, and they've gotten me. They've gotten me where I am today, even if it isn't always where I would like to be. Now, I believe the way the process works is they lead me to either drop a certain card or even just to draw my attention to whatever part of the card I happen to drop. And then that is where the advice comes from. So if you want to call it spiritual energy, I don't believe myself that I have any great gift other than being able to open myself up to these guys and ladies that I've got surrounding me, and to give people the advice they need. Now, if you want a more mundane answer, I really do, and I do believe this, that a great deal of tarot, when you sit down with a tarot card reader, most of the time you already know the answer. I believe the tarot cards, all they really do is guide our intuition. Now, how effectively that happens is based on the energies, what what pops into your head. But I really do think most of the time that it is just a matter of guiding intuition. We already know the answers before we open our mouths, and just saying what comes to mind.
Well, that tracks, because most of the time, for instance, when someone asks for advice, they're really wanting you to tell them to go ahead and do what they've decided to do. And
right.
It doesn't invalidate your value to them. It's a support of what they have already wrestled with and worked out.
Right. Now, the disadvantages to being a tarot card reader, and I'll say this for any tarot card reader.
Okay.
Because I don't take it as seriously as maybe I should still to this day.
Mm-hmm.
it makes me really itchy when someone sits down and says something like, "Should I quit my job?" Oh, hell, don't put that kind of pressure on me.
No.
Should I do what the doctors are telling me? Should, all these kind of stuff. Ask me about your love life. If I screw that up, big deal. Um, but
You
yeah, I get life and death questions,
and
life changing questions. And I'm like, oh, this makes me nervous. I do the best I can. But I usually close most sessions with, just remember, this advice came from a $10 tarot card reader.
yes, and not to disparage the $10 tarot reader. It's simply any decision that's important. You need to be the person controlling that decision.
I agree with that. And so am I telling them? Once again, I think a lot of times my spirit guides kind of dance around it and make sure that I tell them what they already know, or at least tell it in a fashion that they can work it through in their mind. Now, have I ever been wrong? I only know of one reading that I was dead wrong. And I think it's because I had absolutely no emotional connection to it. The person sitting down across from me was very, very skeptical. That was their first tarot card reading ever. And the only reason they did it, somebody told them to do it on a dare. They didn't even want to do it. So I made no personal connection to them. And then they asked me about a situation that was basically geopolitical. In other words, it wasn't,
Yeah, and it would seem to be insulting to the spirit guides as well.
Yeah, because my spirit guides, okay, I tell people, my spirit guides are not, I don't usually ask them to predict the future. What I ask my spirit guides are, what can you do to come to the best outcome of whatever situation you bring to me? And that's what usually works. Asking me about, Russia invading Ukraine, there's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it sitting there. So then we're in pure future prediction. And I do not believe that most events in the future are written in stone. I think that okay, if people use the story, the analogy, well, if psychics were real, they'd win the lottery. And I don't believe that, because I don't believe that lottery is decided until the last ball drops. In other words, there are a lot of factors. What time did you buy your ticket? What time did they, did they do the drawing? How did gravity work? How many times did they turn the tub? It's a lot of math. It's a whole lot of math to figure out exactly which 5 or 6 balls are going to hit the little cup thing. And so that's why I think it doesn't work.
I'd like to back up here for a second, and the term itself is somewhat self-explanatory. But how do you define spirit guides?
Okay. Now, this goes totally into belief, and you will probably find psychics that will tell you that they disagree with me completely.
Okay.
You'll find other people on the religious side that say I'm just full of it. But I believe, okay, first of all, for me to really embrace spirit guides, the way I do, you kind of have to embrace reincarnation. But I believe that somewhere back in history, a bunch of dead people got together, and maybe before they ever died, maybe it was before they were born. But in other words, the spirits got together, and some of us made a team.
Okay.
I wish there was a better way to describe how I picture it. And
coalition, perhaps.
Every time one of us is born, the others have their back. Now, in my case, I think there's some that kind of get assigned or volunteer, who knows, because my spiritual journey, meaning what I've chosen to do in the metaphysical world, has led me into situations that the average person would not have to encounter. And so, but for the most part, I believe that my main spirit guide that I talk to and ask for advice most often, I believe that me and him have been together for God knows how long. And it was my turn. Now, I wish it was deeper than that.
Well, depth in a lot of cases is an illusion. An explanation is, It's like when I ask you a question, I no longer control the dialogue. You respond with the answer you give me, and it doesn't have to be an answer I like.
Well, that's very, very true.
But cultures throughout history have believed that our ancestors look out for us. It's not a new belief. And you mentioned in several instances, you mentioned the Bible. I mean, that's not even precluded by the Judeo-Christian Bible either.
I don't believe it is. Now there are people that tell you that certain passages say no, you can't do this, and I'm like, no, you're not reading it right. If your definitions, because for one thing, this thing, it was written by people that weren't there and translated by people that were even farther away with an agenda. Now that's one thing I always try to remember when I'm ghost hunting with people, is everyone goes into a ghost hunt with an agenda. Whether it's to have the experience or whatever, we all have our own beliefs, and nothing that's going to happen, with very few exceptions, is going to actually change that belief. It's more likely to reinforce it. It might guide it a little different direction, but you're not going to go. An atheist is not going to go into a ghost hunt and be convinced because they got an EVP.
Well, and I would agree with that because the burden of proof would be too heavy to radically change a person's view.
Right. And most people don't want their view changed.
Well, that's true. We do have a nifty little thing called confirmation bias.
Yeah, that's a big one too. Yeah.
We decide something, and then we use all the information we can to support that decision, whether there's contrary information or not.
Yeah. If you doubt that's a real thing, go on. Gosh, this shows how bright my brain is. Go on your video programs, YouTube and the other big one now, TikTok.
Yeah.
And go in there and to see how many people are posting about the Earth being flat.
Yes.
And they use every little piece of anecdotal evidence and put them sometimes in a fairly good string, saying, well, this proves the Earth is flat, without doing the math to realize, no, that's only part of the equation.
Well, a lot of times we are limited with our knowledge at that time. It comes back to sort of the whole expert thing. If we think we've already learned everything there is to learn, then we're not going to grow. We won't gather new information because everything's going to be ordered and placed in the boxes we already have.
Right.
So,
now, I like it, and I'm probably guilty of it too. Everything that I've encountered, that I've experienced, that I've learned in the paranormal field, actually fits into my box, my little box of ideas. I don't have to think outside the box. I just wait for something to drop in it, and everything that is dropped in that box already has at least, it fits. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
It's not to say it's nothing new, but it fits in the box nicely. It doesn't contradict anything.
And I think that in a lot of cases, that's what we want. We don't want to be surprised. And kind of segues into another question I was going to ask. I describe it with paranormal especially. You have one camp that believes in ghosts, no matter what you say.
Right.
The opposite camp will not believe in ghosts, regardless of what you say or any evidence presented.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to the people in the third camp that are like, well, I don't know, maybe it's possible?
Pay attention to my side. I don't know what I tell them. I show them. I can show them evidence I've collected. I can explain things based on my belief system, how things are possible. But that is part of the reason that I went ahead and jumped over to the spiritual side, the metaphysical side, away from the investigative side.
Okay.
Now, some of it was I lost the fire in my belly to sit and watch, for a 4-hour investigation, to watch 30 hours of video, and listen to me talking to walls. I lost that fire in my belly. And another point, I had already collected some evidence that was, unless you want to point at me and say you faked that, the evidence was stood on its own. In other words, there was no alternate explanation other than something paranormal happened or you faked it, Wesley. And I can't convince somebody that I didn't fake it. You can't prove that part necessarily. So I decided I was more comfortable at that point helping people, helping spirits, if you will. So I moved to that side of the equation. But when it comes to the average person, I just don't feel that fire in my belly to convince them one way or the other anymore.
Well, a certain amount of things involve validation. And once we make our decisions on our worldview, then we no longer need that validated. So that could be part of it. And then part of it could be the realization that, it happened to me, for instance. I was interviewing a paranormal group, and I picked up an EVP totally by accident. I believe that was a valid EVP. I know I didn't fake it. But I also knew, unfortunately, there was no way I could convince anyone with 100% certainty that I didn't fake it. And at that point,
then that was a two-way conversation. You also don't have any way to prove that it wasn't faked on the other end of the conversation, assuming it was done over Skype or phone or whatever.
See, and at that point, it becomes, you collect the evidence you can collect.
Right.
And you present that to the people who show interest, and you let them make their decision.
Exactly.
What other things are you typically involved in during the course of the year to, like we mentioned the tarot reading and of course, obviously Scarefest. So what other things are you involved with?
Now, I'm not as involved as I used to be, but now where my spiritual journey took me was because as I alluded to before, I think I'm either Teflon coated or bulletproof. One of the psychics that I used to work with all the time, we were going into a location, and we'd been there we'd been on several hunts together.
Okay.
And because I was not particularly sensitive, empathic, whatever, I didn't take what she said as gospel, but if she said we should be investigating that room, hey, her guess is as good as mine. But she said, she was one of the first ones to call me out. She said, ghost, listen to you. She says, I can hear them, but a lot of times they don't even acknowledge me. But she said, when you talk, for whatever reason, you get their attention. And so I started.
That's a unique gift.
Maybe it is. I think it's a matter of attitude. But I do call it a gift. I call it a gift, and I don't believe there's anything that I did to earn it. It just, boom, there it was. So I started as I embraced the spiritual side, the metaphysical, the psychic side, if you will. I started leveraging that and found that I'm really, really good at crossing spirits over, at removing negative energy from a home or business or whatever. To give you an example of what my gift meant to people, the tour guide that used to be at Bobby Mackey's.
Okay.
Now, Bobby Mackey's notoriously haunted, one of the top two.
Yes, very famous place.
Wanda used to bring in me and a psychic whenever the activity got out of hand, meaning they felt it was getting dangerous to the people stomping around the basement.
Okay.
So I would come in, and I didn't really throw my weight around. I went in, I guess a couple of times I did, but for the most part, I just went in and gave the ghost a good talking to. And the talking to amounted to, you don't want me to come back. It was that, you kids don't make me stop this car kind of speech.
Well, sometimes that's effective.
Well, apparently it was, because every time I would do it, the only time it ever hurt my feelings, Ghost Adventures, who have investigated there a few times, did a special, and they called it, gosh, what was it? After Adventures or Aftershock or something. In words, some of the cases they had investigated, and they went back and talked to the people there about how the activity was. And when they did the Bobby Mackey's, she described how some recent really bad, experiences people had.
Yes.
The part they didn't tell them was I was one of the two people called in after those experiences to shut it down. Now, my best example publicly, though, was I got invited to be one of the celebrity headliners at Bobby Mackey's for a Halloween investigation. So Halloween night, they called in me and an Anglican exorcist. And so and the exorcist was really the headliner. I was the B card, but we went in there and he took them on an investigation, and I worked with people on some EVP work and probably did some dowsing. I don't even remember. But at the end of the night, the tour guides tell the group, "I'm sorry it was so quiet tonight. We've never had a night this quiet. We don't understand it." and I'm back in the corner going, "Lady, you've got an exorcist in the parking lot, and you got a spiritual bouncer called in. These ghosts are going, what the heck did we do to deserve this? Everybody sit down, be quiet." And I really believe that's what happened.
Well, yeah, it's like a bunch of unruly kids in school when the principal shows up.
Yeah. Mary Ducina, a fairly famous psychic, talking to her, and she called me a soul sheriff, because that's just the way my mind works.
That's an interesting term.
I enforce the natural laws, if you will. And she called me a soul sheriff. She said, "That is your title." And I said, "Cool. That sounds really cool." So that's kind of what I used called myself for a while.
Right.
But yeah, it's my job on this earth, at least up until recently, has been to make sure paranormal activity didn't get out of hand. Now, I don't do as much of it as I used to, because now there are more people out there, more psychics out there who are willing to take on these darker cases, these more negative cases. But they are, psychics are who used to. I didn't put an ad in the paper. Word got around to the various psychic markets in the area and everything that's what I did. And sometimes they'd tag along, but it was pretty much a referral thing. A client would come to them, say, "Will you help me? My house is haunted." And the psychic would go, "No, I don't want to do that, but let me call Wesley."
Exactly. Yes. Well, I mean, you call the sheriff to eliminate the lawbreakers.
Now, that being said, I want everybody to understand that I did kind of work on a sliding scale. In other words, now that doesn't mean I actually ever got paid. Although one guy did give us a good stipend over our gas money, but yes. But we never asked for anything. We never even asked to be reimbursed. Gosh, where was I even going with this? I completely forgot the story. Slipped my mind there. But so, what was the question?
Which one?
The last one.
We were talking about. Well, actually,
you're no better than me.
No, I'm listening to you ramble, because in a very real way, it's like listening to myself, because I ramble that much too. But no, of course, you mentioned the whole thing about the soul sheriff, and we were talking about spirit guides and various different entities, and this all started with asking you if you had ever felt personally threatened. And
yeah, that was way back.
Yeah, that was way back. And part of where I was going with this, to kind of segue here, and you will probably be the perfect person to ask. a lot of times people will experience the paranormal, and we'll say ghosts for the sake of the argument there,
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
and they become terrified and they feel horribly threatened and they don't really know how to deal with this. Do you have any advice?
Set your boundaries. That's the number one thing. Most of the things out there creeping around in the dark, if you will,
Mm.
are just, yeah, they're ghosts. They're just leftover. They're the remains of our dearly departed. And sometimes they were kind of a jerk in life, so they've decided to be a jerk in the afterlife. Now, there are varying degrees of that. There are, um, entities that I call it devolving. In other words, after they passed away, I don't know if it's a deal with the devil or that's just it's something natural that happens to nasty people. But I do believe, like, okay, one example. I believe there are things out there called soul collectors. Now,
All
these
right.
soul collectors are based, they're human spirits, but I hate to call them just a ghost because basically they tend to collect other ghosts and somehow it seems, I don't know if it's they feed off the emotion, they feed off the energy. I don't know. But a lot, Amy Allen has on her show has encountered that type of entity before.
Yes.
It makes a place seem even more haunted than it might actually be. Um, so there are other things out there, but for the most part, the answer is set your boundaries. Now, one thing people won't do because they think they sound crazy is okay, if something's happening in your house and you don't like it,
Mm.
use your voice and say you don't like it. Say, hey, don't walk up behind me, please, ever again. You can be polite, but I'm just saying be forceful, stand your ground, and just, but always use your voice. Um, that is, I'll say, make sure the message gets across, and it also is reinforcing to you. In other words, when you hear your own voice say, that was nothing, that was nothing, don't sneak it behind whatever it is. I think
Yes.
that actually reinforces your own being, your own energy.
So now, given that, that puts us in the position of, if not necessarily control of the situation, but having more authority of the situation.
Yeah. The way I explain that to people, okay, when we're talking about, in particular, various types of ghost,
Mm.
okay, you have the advantage. You've got life. I guarantee you, if you could get any ghost to really tell you the truth, what they wanted, they wish they were alive. They wish they were still alive. And you've got that. You're already ahead of the game. Now they can do things that freak you out because, and I really think that a lot of what we feel in the paranormal aspect of things, that is our body's natural reaction to something that it doesn't recognize, something that doesn't feel natural to it. I don't really think that footsteps in the attic is something that I would call natural.
No.
Because it could be a squirrel, could be your dead grandmother, it could be an axe murderer hiding out. Who knows?
This is
Um,
true. And I was thinking, you said that it could be part of our genetic hardwiring for the fight or flight.
right, right. And I think that explains a lot of what we the way we react to the paranormal.
So, what kind of advice would you give people that were interested in maybe exploring a little bit more about this? What?
That's almost a tough one. And the reason it's tough is okay, if somebody says, I want to go ghost hunting, step number one, run down a public ghost hunt. Find one of these celebrity hunts, whatever. Now try to find one that's a little longer, more involved. But and yeah, it's probably going to cost you 50 or 100, maybe $200 if it's the right celebrity. But
Okay.
find out if that is really something. If if talking to walls in the dark is really your thing. Now, if you're just doing it for the fear factor of it, watch a horror movie. But find out if it's in your blood. Then find a reputable um, team in your area if you actually do want to go ghost hunting. I don't recommend anybody do it just out on their own. Now, actually, I did, and it worked out for me. But I think I had the right location and the right attitude going into it. But if you can find a team that will let you tag along and hold a voice recorder or hold the flashlight or hold a camera or whatever, kind of don't rush into it.
Okay.
People ask me, should I protect myself? If you feel like you need to protect yourself, then the answer is yes. If you feel no need for protection, then the answer is probably not.
Fair enough. So, on the more, and I hate to say more metaphysical because ghosts themselves are metaphysical, but from the more spiritual aspect of it, if people were interested in that, where would you point them? I mean,
local metaphysical fairs. They're around the state. They're around the nation. The one I go to most is the Central Kentucky Mystical Market. But they do have them in Northern Kentucky. Other places have them. In other words, don't be afraid to go to these things because 90% of it's a big craft show anyway. It has nothing to do with ghost or anything else. But then if you've never had a psychic reading, people ask me, what psychic should I go to? And I say, okay, here's how I decided what psychics I was going to go to originally. I went to a psychic and said, what psychic would you go to?
Okay.
In other words, I don't just, willy-nilly
right.
choose a psychic. And truth of the matter is, if you find the psychic that the psychics trust, that's a good place to start. And they will give you advice. They will, tell you, yes, you're gifted, or, maybe you should, deal with this in your life first. Now, I do want to back up when it comes to like ghost hunting. I do tell people that if you have so much as a head cold, don't go ghost hunting. Don't go into a haunted location, challenging spirits or talking to them if you have any mental or physical weakness that could make you vulnerable. I'm not saying you're going to get possessed, but I do think it could make any bad experiences easier to experience.
That's fair, and that's a good caution. You don't want to be compromised before you could potentially be compromised.
Right.
Well, I think we've covered quite a few bases here. I have the feeling that there's much more conversation that needs to be had.
I still want to know what I was talking about that one time.
Well, I tell you what, I'll go back through when I'm editing, and we'll make that your next episode.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Wes, thank you very much for being on the podcast. We really appreciate your insight and your experience. I won't call you an expert, although I have the impression that you are established person in the field. Put it that way.
I feel comfortable with that description.
For the time being, then, you have a wonderful afternoon, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you for having me on, Charlie.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you.
This is Charles Romans, and on behalf of myself and our guests, thank you for joining us on this walk through the shadows of legend. If you like what you heard, please follow us and visit our website at shadowsoflegend.com and support our Patreon page to help keep the content flowing. And if you would like to be a guest and share your own brush with a stranger paranormal, don't hesitate to email us and include a contact number. The strange and surreal, the normal and the paranormal are all aspects of the world in which we live. As you reflect upon the stories we have shared, keep in mind that the people sharing these stories are actual, real people just like us. Were the stories shared compelling enough to be given credibility, or should they be relegated to the deeper part of the shadows? But when determining this, it might be a good idea to keep an open mind, because when we look around, we might discover that our own world is less brightly lit than we once thought. Until next time, I'll be waiting for you in the shadows of legend.